I'm at the point now where coverage of World War II is so vast that my understanding of some of the campaigns has gone from knowing very little to knowing a little bit more. But my thirst to understand more about the Eastern Front and the Pacific Campaign and the Japanese-Chinese war that was even going on before my country gets involved and yours gets involved, that stuff is just, I'm like a cat with catnip on that stuff now.
An excerpt from today's guest, who operates one of the most popular World War II channels on YouTube. Paul Woodadge of WW2TV is here, and I'll speak with him after this break. This is Porn in the Spear. Welcome back. I'm Robert Child. Today's guest has conducted hundreds of historian interviews. His popular channel on YouTube is called WW2TV. And from Normandy, France, author, filmmaker, and battlefield guide, Paul Woodadge joins us now. Paul, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
I've watched several videos on your channel, and it seems like you release a new one hourly.
It feels like that. It's about 5 a week normally.
Well, you've been going to Normandy for a long time, since the 80s. What sparked your interest in World War II?
It's very simple. It's simply my age. I'm 52, so when I was a kid in the 1970s in Britain, kids played with model soldiers, model aircraft kits. We read World War II comics. We listened to World War II movie soundtracks. We saw movies on a Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon, and kids of my generation played World War II in the back garden. Maybe my parents' generation played Cowboys and Indians, and the next generation perhaps played Star Wars. But when I was a kid, it was all just World War II. All the people, I grew up with teachers who are World War II veterans, next door neighbors who are World War II veterans, my own family. So complete, total immersion in World War II from a very, very young age, essentially.
Did you have G.I. Joes as well?
We had Action Men, which was the British equivalent of, but yes, I did, yeah.
Yeah, I had those, the 12-inch action figures.
Yep, that's the ones, yep.
Now, you actually moved to Normandy in 2001. Was that to be closer to the history, or?
Yeah, essentially. But it all kind of came about because there was a website that existed in Britain before Facebook called Friends Reunited, and I signed up for that, and I found out that all my classmates from the grammar school I went to were all doing, it was like insurance, banking, insurance, accountancy, insurance, banking, insurance. And I thought, I'm 30-something, I've done a various bits and pieces of things, and I thought, I want to make World War II what I want to do. I don't want to be another one of those casualties on that list of just being stuck in some 9-to-5 office job. So I took the plunge and went to Normandy. I didn't really know what I was going to do. I thought I'd find a job in a museum or something, and in the end that didn't become possible. Becoming a tour guide did. So I kind of did it on a whim, early 30s, and haven't looked back, really.
Yeah, you've been doing tours for a long time in Normandy. Do you do tours in other parts of Europe or France?
I have done a little bit, and it's something I might move in. Well, I am moving into, kind of, rather than where I had been doing, which is being with people for a day or two in Normandy. I'm moving more into the week-long tours where you start in one battlefield and move to another, or something like that. So I've got a couple lined up for next year, theoretically, that will take me outside of Normandy. So it's quite exciting.
I'll bet the pandemic had an impact on your tours.
Yeah, I mean, basically, yeah. I mean, I went from doing I was cutting down touring anyway to start my YouTubing creation, but yeah, I'd been doing 120, 130 tours a year, and wow. I think last year I did, so that's days, not say tours, touring days. I think last year I did 7, and this year I've done 2, I think. Because my partner's a tour guide, so any work I've got that's come my way, I've passed it on to her, so at least one of us is doing it, so I can allow myself the time to do my YouTube work. So yeah, it's been devastating. It's picking up, but yeah, 90% of our income just ended 18 months ago.
Yeah, overnight for a lot of people. Now you're an author and a filmmaker, but you started the YouTube channel, was it in 2019 that you started that?
Yeah, and I initially thought about trying to make proper kind of documentaries. You know, me go out with a camera, film stuff, high definition, come back, narrate over it, or find a narrator, cut in all the, you know, the wartime footage, that type of thing. And I did a couple of them and found out that I hated it, basically. I hated how long it took to do the editing. That was just frustrating, how just many hours you spend to make a 20-minute video.
I know your pain.
Yeah, well, anyone who does this knows exactly the score on that. And I also felt I lost all the spontaneity of being a tour guide where your audience is there. I mean, I have done a bit of writing. I'm doing a bit of writing again at the moment, but my 20 years has basically been speaking to people on a one-to-one basis. And by doing documentaries, I lost that direct contact, that ability to you know, go down directions you weren't expecting to go, disappear down rabbit holes, kind of spitball ideas. And so that's when I moved, after doing a couple of documentaries that were all right, quite well received, to doing the live stuff, which is why, frankly, I can get away with doing 5 a week, because my guest joins me live, we record, I press end stream, and that's it. It stands and falls on how it was on the day, and I don't take it down and edit it again. So it looks like I'm doing a lot of work, but actually someone who's putting out an edited film a week is probably doing a hell of a lot work than I am, because I'm doing my stuff live.
Yeah, that was one of my questions. Why on your channel that you increased the volume of your output? Was it a demand from your subscribers, or was it a growth strategy for your channel?
Well, I mean, I haven't really had any strategy since I started. I mean, I started making these kind of what I want to call proper documentaries, and then last year, so touring industry was just disappeared in March, and I wasn't really sure what to do, and I need to be busy. I'm a person who can't be just sitting around. I can be sitting around doing nothing, but then it controls my life. I need to make myself do something, and I hit upon the idea. So this is last year, 2020, of doing a D-Day live stream. So me sitting in my house, and then friends out at sites joining me via Zoom, filming bits and pieces, and inviting some historian friends of mine on. And I ended up doing, I think it was 15 hours sitting at my desk live without a break. And that's, I did have a couple of pee breaks. So I'm not a superhuman, but and that's where the idea then came out of that, to sort of bring these historians back individually, one-on-one, and talk to them for an hour and a half about whatever it is we decided to talk about. And then it's just evolved from there, but without me really kind of having a strategy. I started asking a few mates to come and talk to me. That worked quite well. Then I started doing some live stuff from normally where I live, and that kind of worked quite well. Then I started, essentially what I've been doing in the last, well, since this year began, is doing theme weeks. So I'm just starting tomorrow Australia in World War II week. So there'll be 5 shows, 5 Australian authors tackling subjects about the Australian military in World War II. So if I was to do a theme like that, but doing 1 show a week, it would take me a month and a bit to get through a theme.
Yep.
And some people who listen to one type of show don't listen to another type of show. So by doing it in a week, if it's a subject that my viewers do like, then they've got a whole intensive week of a subject that's close to them. If they don't like it, they can just wait a few days. The next week will come along, and hopefully that one will have a subject that they like. I try and sort of mix it up. So in September I had Battle of Britain week, then Arnhem week, then Jungles week. So Jungles kind of catch-all for stories that covered different theatres where there were jungles. So it's really a way of me fitting into how things kind of went along naturally without me actually planning it. I mean, I'm planning things a bit more now.
Okay.
But I've done a couple of people have asked me before for interviews and things, and they've said, "Well, has your grand strategy gone to how you plan?" I go, "Well, I didn't have one, so I can't really answer that question, because that's really how I've lived my life. And when I came to Normandy 20 years ago, is I'll just get on a boat and come here and do something. And I've been lucky, touch wood, that it's most of the things I've done in that regard have been moderately successful. So I just go with it. Gut instinct, I suppose.
I hope you're enjoying this episode. Next time, my guest will be author Don Hallway, who's written the true account of a king who many believe was the greatest warrior to ever live.
I wanted to write about Harold Hardrada ever since I first heard his story as a kid. He fought from Scandinavia to Russia, Constantinople, the Holy Lands, Sicily. He didn't start from quite nothing, but carved himself a kingdom by basically the strength of his sword arm. I mean, he's just a Viking's Viking.
That's next time. So this is your full-time work then?
I'd like to do this full-time. It's all about whether or not it becomes financially viable, because as you know, someone doing podcasts, you put incredible amount of work into it and there isn't, very much reward unless you're one of the really big hitters. And there are some really big hitters on the YouTube and podcast world talking about military subjects, and whether or not I will make it to those ranks remains to be seen, really.
Well, it seems like the interest in World War II could support it. There is great interest in the war, so the audience is there. It's just getting the word out.
I think so. It's the narrowness of the point, kind of no pun intended given the name of your podcast, is that the more niche you go, the smaller the audience becomes. So if you do like a 15-minute show on YouTube about which is the best fighter aircraft of World War II, and you have lots of graphics of buzzing Spitfires and P-51s, that will get you loads of instant views because people love that 15 minutes, lots of animations and explosions. If in my case, so tomorrow's show, we're probably doing an hour and a half talking about the Battle of the Bismarck Sea, so Australian American forces off New Guinea in 1943. Now, some people won't have heard of that battle. Because it's not Arnhem, it's not Normandy, it's not Midway. Because, as we know, there's like those 10 battles people can name from World War II, and they love to talk about all the time. But actually beyond that, the level of knowledge drops, the level of interest drops a bit. So me talking for an hour and a half about a kind of a niche subject. I mean, week before last, we did an hour and a half on Turkey's neutrality in World War II with a Turkish historian, all about the kind of politics behind that and meetings. But that's kind of quite niche. As brilliant as the guest was, it's not. It doesn't appeal to that same kind of market who want, people discussing Band of Brothers or the very popular mainstream things. And you know exactly what I'm talking about, because I've been looking at what you've been doing. You like me, you kind of alternate between something really popular, something a little bit less, trying to retain some integrity, but also bring people in with the things that people are interested in. It's a constant battle to no pun intended, given we're talking about World War II, to find that audience. And I know that I'm not going to get the millions of viewers because I'm doing something a little bit too specialized for some people.
Yeah, and Battle of the Bismarck Sea, I actually know about that battle because it was tied to, I have a book coming out in January in the Southeast Asia theater, but I actually know about the Battle of the Bismarck.
Oh, well, yeah, no, I mean, I some people do, but a lot of people don't, and it's a weird thing. I think I've been repeating myself a lot on World War II TV, is I think we have this, there are lots of people out there who say they love World War II. They're the ones who have the magazines subscriptions. They go on the big tours to Iwo Jima, Pearl Harbor with Stephen Ambrose, or the World War II Museum, or in Britain they go with Ledger and what have you. And they get their proverbial book token given to them for their birthday, and they go to a bookshop, be it in person or online, and they kind of think, I'll try something new. I'll dive into a theatre I don't know about. But what happens to a lot of them, myself included? They come out with a book on a subject they already know about, because there's that level of comfort. I'll buy another Arnhem book. It's another Normandy book. And I'm like that with my music choices now in my 50s. It's like, I can't be bothered with new stuff. I want to go through the back catalogue of the people I've been listening to for 30 years. And I think that kind of thing is also part of World War II and history. The same applies to your Civil War. That Gettysburg is still the big number one.
Yeah. Yep.
You could argue there isn't much more to say about Gettysburg, but a book on Gettysburg will Robert E. Lee, that type of thing, will just create a buzz that if you're writing about some obscure battle, it doesn't get that kind of I don't know what the word is, kind of just popular interest, really. So it's always a battle to know which direction to go with this type of programming, really. And as I say, I haven't got a strategy, so I just kind of, if in doubt, I go with what my gut tells me, really.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that when you were saying it, thinking about Band of Brothers, where people will just buy another Band of Brothers book or another, something about Band of Brothers. There's even a podcast that started recently.
Yeah.
On Band
Yeah,
of
no,
Brothers.
and they're very entertaining. And I knew a lot of those veterans. I know a lot of the actors who are in the TV show through various things I've done over the years, and we kind of joke it's the just when you think the cash cow is on its last legs, it seems to get a kind of a boost, and up it rises and it carries on, and it's absolutely extraordinary, and it's both a brilliant positive and a slightly limiting negative at the same time. Is that you know a book about Dick Winters or the 506th or something will again find traction, and there's some brilliant some friends of mine are writing books on this subject, and I love that subject. I'm just helping to a book on Ron Spears that's coming out shortly with friends of mine. I'm helping with that. I think you've interviewed Jared, haven't you?
Yeah, I have.
So it's great, but the other part of me thinks is that why can't we be talking about another unit? In fact, on this week in Australia at War Week, I'm a guest, Mark Johnston, a really renowned Australian historian. He's written a book called The Australian Band of Brothers, about a unit in the 9th Infantry Division who fought from, and we talk about how long some Americans were overseas, like 2 years. This is an Australian unit that overseas for 5 years, summer of 1940 to summer of 1945, Tobruk, El Alamein, New Guinea, all the way through. And, he was trying to create that kind of buzz of following a unit that Stephen Ambrose so successfly did. Right. And typically it's he's this author's most best-selling book because of the words Band of Brothers in the title, which it's just an incredible sales increaser, or what's the word I'm looking for?
It's like a golden touch.
Yeah, it's just it's incredible, and it's and I've been part of that myself. I've been part of Band of Brothers reunions and tours and things over the years, and I loved some of the people I got to meet, and it was an extraordinary time in my life. But I'm at the point now where the coverage of World War II is so vast that my understanding of some of the campaigns has gone from knowing very little to knowing a little bit more. But my thirst to understand more about the Eastern Front and the Pacific Campaign, and the Japanese-Chinese war that was even going on before my country gets involved and yours gets involved, that stuff is just, I'm like a cat with catnip on that stuff now. And although I live in Normandy and I love talking about Normandy and D-Day, I've walked people around Pointe du Hoc over 1,000 times. I've told people about the church in Saint-Marie-Église over 1,000 times, and I love it to some extent, but there's other stuff. Other stuff happened that was pivotal to the war.
I agree, and I've found that over the last decade or so. I produced 2 films on African Americans in World War II and 2 books. My book, The Lost 11, about the massacre in Wereth, and I've got a book coming out in January, Immortal Valor, about the 7 Black Medal of Honor recipients.
And I'll invite you right now. You'll have to come on my channel and talk about it, because it's
definitely.
So let's get that booked straight away.
Yeah, but what I found is there's such a treasure trove of stories, untold stories about Black GIs in World War II, that it's like a whole new, if someone really looked into it, it's like a whole new treasure trove of stories to be told, and that's what I found.
No, absolutely, and I'm really trying to get more and more historians who aren't white, middle-aged guys, because a lot of the gatekeeping with military history from World War II is people like me and you, frankly. And I'm trying to work on the idea that if I'm talking about the 14th Army in Burma, most of those guys were from Bengal, they were from Nepal, they were from various other parts of India and what is now Pakistan. The great majority were were not my color, you know, and
Right.
and yet that story, the Burma campaign, has until relatively recently been told by white historians, and often very, very well. But the perspective of white historians of a middle age from a certain background constantly telling these same stories, to me is a narrow view. I want to hear what people from these areas experienced in World War II. I want to hear what the people of Hawaii thought about Pearl Harbor, not just the people on the ships. I want to hear about the people of Belgium and Luxembourg when the Battle of the Bulge was going on, and the work of those historians, as well as I love having John McManus and Alex Kirsch and all those kind of guys who are friends of mine on my show. They're brilliant. I love them. They're my mates. But as much as I want to do that, I get really excited if someone contacts me who is not from that same demographic, who wants to talk about it. It's like, brilliant, thank you, because I know that their voice will add depth to our understanding of the war.
That brings up one of my questions. You've interviewed so many historians and authors over the past few years. Is there someone who's come on that has told you a story or a fact that you didn't quite believe or you'd never heard of?
Not that I haven't believed, but things I haven't heard of, like, all the time. And it's just recently, Dr. Philip Blood, who's become a mate of mine, a Brit living in Aachen, his book Birds of Prey about the Germans in Poland, but this is the Luftwaffe there, and they were absolutely responsible for some reprehensible crimes, and people we know like Adolf Galland were on the fringes of this. And I grew up from that generation where the Battle of Britain Luftwaffe pilots were kind of chivalrous, or that's what I was led to believe. And people like Adolf Galland spoke in England and went to air shows in England and was regarded very well. And then you hear about this sinister side of what the Luftwaffe was up to in World War II, and that kind of stuff is, I believe it because Philip Blood has spent 25 years researching it, but it drops my jaw in the sense of how new this information is, and people like a unit I didn't know much about. I've done a couple of shows on recently, Alamo Scouts, for example, from your country. Incredible work these people did. I didn't know much about that. So I am learning all the time, and I find it very weird when I hear people say that their opinions about things haven't changed in 10 years. Mine changed from like week to week, day to day almost. Because someone will present a view, send me a book or a PDF, and I read it and go, well, that's completely changed how I thought about that battle. Yeah. And it might change again when another book comes out. Maybe I'm just I'm like a sponge. I just take on a new account. But I like to think it's because I've got an interest in, I don't just stand on this, well, this is my version of this, and I'm always going to think that. If someone presents a version of something, I'm like, wow. The one that's still dividing people is Dieppe, because you had Patrick Bishop on, didn't you, recently?
Yes.
I haven't read his new book yet, but this idea about whether or not Dieppe was a pinch raid, so specifically set up to get an Enigma machine. Now, I'm very much in the camp that I do believe it was built around a pinch raid, because I got to know David O'Keefe, who wrote this brilliant book on Dieppe, and a brilliant guest, by the way. But when I went into his book, I didn't believe this idea of it all being to get Enigma codes at all. I sat there, I couldn't sit there arms folded because I was holding the book, but metaphorically I was arms folded going, you're going to have to sell this one to me, David. And halfway through the book, there was like a moment when my brain went ching, and I realized, yep, no, he's good. Everything he said, I'm completely convinced of it. And in fact, just today, there's a group of us agreeing we're going to kind of meet up in a pub, theoretically, sometime next year and just talk about Dieppe. This is kind of historians about intelligence, historians about commando raids. This is like a who's who of people. Sol David is interested in doing it. Just written a book about the SBS. Patrick Bishop, I think, is going to be invited. David O'Keefe wants to come over. And we'll just take over a pub, restaurant room or something, and thrash it out to the death about exactly what Dieppe was all about, and those kind of books can be, I don't want to use the word life-changing, but they're game-changing. Not life-changing, but they're game-changing. You put it down and go, wow, okay, that's it. All I've ever thought about that, I'm questioning everything. And that's exciting. Don't you find the same?
Yeah, I do. And one of the reasons I brought Patrick on was because Americans don't and have never heard of Dieppe, the battle. Everything starts after a certain time, after Normandy, essentially. But Dieppe, what's Dieppe? So
Yeah.
I want folks to, learn about it. The channel is WW2TV on YouTube, and I encourage everyone to sign on and give it a look. It's a great channel. Paul, thank you so much for joining us today.
No, thank you. I've had fun, and I like talking to anybody who's doing a similar thing, because I'm very much of in the camp that people will be learning their history from different mediums in the future. I'm from the generation where I buy books, but my stepkids don't buy books in that way. Their way of assimilating, finding out information is going on the internet. So podcast, YouTube, video games, all those types of things are going to be the way people get their history in the future. So anybody who's on board with that, like yourself, I'm kind of feel connected with that, because I think it's going to be a revolution over the next few years in terms of, just to say, how people access their history.
I agree. That's it for this episode. Thanks again for joining me. Next time, my guest will be author Don Hallway, who's written the true account of a king who many believe was the greatest warrior to ever live.
I wanted to write about Harold Hardrada ever since I first heard his story as a kid. He fought from Scandinavia to Russia, Constantinople, the Holy Lands, Sicily. He didn't start from quite nothing, but carved himself a kingdom by basically the strength of his sword arm. I mean, he's just a Viking's Viking.
That's next time. And if you like what you hear, please share the show on social media and follow me on Twitter @RobChild. I'm Robert Child, and this has been Point of the Spear.
Music licensed from audioblocks.com. Point of the Spear is produced by RSC Media Group.